Hi everybody, this is Scott Dudley from SaaS Startup Stories, and today my special guest is Clint Oram, who's based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Clint is the co-founder of SugarCRM, who provide a clear picture of each customer without all the headaches and hassles that come with traditional CRMs. Welcome to the show, Clint. Are you ready to rock and roll?
You bet, Scott. Thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, so let's get started. Let's start off with your background and what initially got you interested in starting a SaaS company in the first place.
A SaaS company? Well, when you ask that question, it makes me think specifically about software as a service. So I started my CRM career back in 1999 in the professional services department of a small CRM startup. And I didn't have any background in CRM at all. I got my university degree in computer science. I was a coder by background. I've been working at HP. It was 1999, and for those of us that remember 1999, that was the dot-com boom. It was exciting, and in fact, I had somebody that I worked with pull me aside and say, "What are you doing in HP? You should be out at a startup." I said, "Oh, that's a good point." And so I went off and I joined a startup. I just happened to join a company where I had a few friends. All I knew about CRM was how to spell it, nothing more than that. I got put into the professional services team, thrown out into the field, helping a company do a deployment of the CRM software. And I'm at the customer site, and the customer saying, "Yeah, I want to get the orders module turned on as soon as possible." And I remember looking at this person and saying, "We don't have an orders module." I don't know what it is that you think you bought, but it was kind of one of those aha moments of, and it's certainly the case back then, of when salespeople got ahead of themselves and were selling the vision, but the practical reality of the software didn't match what was being sold. And I then went on in my career to be recruited out of the professional services organization into the product management organization to help guide the development of the product that I was building. I went on to build that orders module that was missing from the product. But it always stuck in my head of selling something that's not there, right? Of sales teams getting ahead of themselves, selling science fiction stories, if you will, of a lot of the false promises of the dot-com era, which ultimately led to the dot-com bust, right? And as we came out of the dot-com bust, there was a huge backlash against enterprise software. And that backlash ultimately culminated into open source and software as a service and subscription billing, and the whole idea of try before you buy and earn that customer's business every year, and put the control in the hands of the customer around the destiny that they'll have with the software. And that's what really inspired me, was that idea of bringing honesty and truthiness to software. And that's what we have today in the software as a service industry, where we're having to earn our customers' business every single year.
There wouldn't be many CRMs around back then, would there?
Oh, there was certainly a handful. I mean, the thing you got to remember is managing customer data. Well, every company's been doing that since the dawn of business. Now, it might have been on clay tablets or papyrus, a couple thousand years ago, but everybody has to keep track of their customers. So there's always been some sort of technology in the last 40 or 50 years, but there weren't that many companies. If you look at the industry now, there's thousands of CRM companies for all kinds of niches and verticals and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Was this before Salesforce?
This was concurrent with Salesforce. So the company that I was with, a company called Octane Software, got started about a year before Salesforce got started. And so my company had its whole life cycle. It got acquired by another company and all these other types of things as Salesforce was just getting started. But I've pretty much been competing against Salesforce for the vast majority of my CRM career.
Okay, I thought you might be, yeah. All right, so
gotta love him, gotta hate him, gotta love to hate him, right? All that.
Exactly, can understand that. So your father founded a technology company in the early 80s. Tell us about that experience as a teenager and some of the mistakes that you learned during that period.
Well, like any major event in your early years, it really tends to shape your thinking as you go off on your own. And so for me, I had this very rare opportunity to be at my father's knee as he was building a software company that today would have been an internet software company. It would have been an internet startup, but we didn't have those terms back then. This was all pre-internet. And he built a company that connected public service agencies like fire departments and police departments and that sort of thing with media agencies. So the local newspaper, the local news station, that sort of thing. And if you remember back then, when a major event happened, an earthquake or a hurricane or something like that, to get the word out, you had to call on the phone tree, right? You had to start calling people around, and you're only as effective as the phone was in connecting with somebody. And this is before pagers, and you know, we had just, back in the early 80s, we had just come out with answering machines of all things. And so he created a software program based upon pre-email technology called bulletin board services, BBSs, and he created a private email service to connect these public service agencies with the media agencies, and he called it the Media Computer Network, MCN. And I was 10, 11, 12 years old while this was all happening.
Yep.
Very exciting days back then. And he had me testing software, and he had me stuffing envelopes. And when I was older, I was going to trade shows and doing demos at the booth. And so I had the opportunity to get started in the software industry before a lot of people even really knew that the software industry existed. And I definitely learned some lessons at my father's knee there, in that his company went bankrupt when email came out. So 10 years later, email comes out, totally changes the model. He couldn't figure out how to pivot, right? He was so wed to his first generation technology that when the next generation technology came along, he just couldn't figure out how to change the business. And he ended up having to shut it down. And that was its own trauma in its own right. You know, a young man going off to college and watching his dad have to shut down the business and declare bankruptcy. And that was just a lot of lessons learned, if you can imagine.
Yep.
But a few of those lessons in there, certainly the big one is don't be afraid to pivot your business. When technology changes, you have to change with that technology. And certainly that's been true in my own company, as technology has changed quite a bit over the last almost 20 years that we've been in business. Probably the other big lesson that I learned in there was really check your ego at the door. You know, when you're a founder, when you're starting a business, it's very exciting to get your idea off the ground. It's your thoughts, your concepts, your visions, your dreams, your code. But you got to build a team around you, and you got to hire great people. You got to hire people that are even better than you at their parts of the business. Your job is to have the vision. Their job is to execute on it. And you know, my dad had a hard time letting go at times. He had a hard time hiring people that were better than him. And that was probably the lesson. I didn't, you know, back in those early days, I didn't really quite understand the idea of a technology pivot, but I certainly understood the idea of having to hire great people and check your ego at the door. And so as I started my own business 20 years later, 15, 20 years later, I took those lessons to heart.
Yeah, it would have been very beneficial in that regard. Yeah.
Lessons learned the hard way, no doubt about it.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So if we go back to when you first started SugarCRM, did you borrow VC money to launch it, or did you bootstrap it instead? Tell us a bit about how you actually got it off the ground in the first place.
We had the tiger by the tail. I got to tell you, Scott, right idea, right time. I remember that year vividly, 2004. And in January of 2004, the guy I was sitting next to at work, that same company I was telling you about, right? Yep. After we've been bought by another company, we were two product managers sitting in two cubicles next to each other. We go out to lunch one day, we start kicking around an idea. 3 months later, we're pitching the idea to a VC, to a venture capital firm. Didn't have any code. And the person says, her name was Mary Coleman. Mary says to us, it gave me a lot to think about. let me think about this, which I didn't understand at that time was investors telling you, thank you, here's the door, right?
Ah, okay.
But we were so inspired by a VC saying that she liked our idea and gave her a lot to think about that we quit our jobs. We quit our jobs in April and we started writing code and we started releasing the first versions of our product as open source code.
Yep.
And so doing the freemium model.
Ah, yes.
And that was in May of 2004. So just 5 months later.
Yep.
And then in June, we were all along we were pitching our ideas to different VCs, just trying to get some traction going. We expected to go 1-2 years without being able to raise any venture capital. But it was in June 2004 that we were doing a demo at a summer showcase of young startups presenting to the VC community.
Yep.
And this young VC named Josh Stein loved what we were doing, and he gave us $2 million, which just blew us away. We were prepared to bootstrap all along, but we got that early VC investment. We went out and hired our first 10 people, started selling software, and we finished that year, 2004, with $250,000 in sales. So January, it was 2 guys with an idea. End of the year, we had raised $2 million in venture funding. We'd released our product. We had $250,000 in sales. And in fact, in the very first week of selling, we signed up 2 customers, both on the same day. One of them technically being the second customer, a company called Interpretive Learning. And they're still with us. They're still with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Gee, that's awesome.
You bet.
Okay, well, you mentioned those first 10 customers. That was actually my next question. How did you actually get those? Because that would be the hardest thing, wouldn't it? The first 10 customers of the new company.
Well, that was the beauty of open source in 2004 is you had literally millions of people looking around for free open source software. And so we did the freemium model. We launched our software out to the public for free. And then we sold a version on top of that had more features. And so we plugged right into this distribution machine, which was called sourceforge.net, which was a website for distributing open source software. And so we found a perfect mechanism for getting our idea out to the world community very quickly. And frankly, the phone was ringing off the hook. That was our entire marketing machine was doing a freemium version of our product. That took us through the first $1 million in software, if you will, and then we had to get really serious about creating a company after that.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say it was a lot easier back in those days to today, or what do you reckon?
I think you need to really be able to plug into to launch a company and to get a company off the ground. It's so much easier if you're plugging into a meme into an idea that's already captured the marketplace. And our strategy was to become the most mentioned commercial open source company. Open source had captured the attention of journalists and business people alike around the world.
Yep.
And our entire strategy was to attach our name as the business application software that when people describe open source, they would then say companies like SugarCRM. And that idea of latching onto a bigger idea, an idea that's bigger than your company, a meme that's bigger than your company. Well, frankly, from an advertising perspective, there is no better advertising than having the journalists talk about you and to become a household name that way. And that's what worked for us.
Okay, fascinating. All right, so yeah, tell me a bit about the SugarCRM product and what exactly it provides to its users.
Yeah, so it's very simply put, we help customers find and grow their customers. And so our customers need to go out and sign up their own customers. They need to get their marketing message out into the marketplace. They need to help their buyers through the buyer's journey. They need to help onboard new customers. They need to track the onboarding process. They need to track any customer service issues that might come after that. And then ultimately their goal through that customer journey is to turn their customers into #raving fans. Yep. And it's our software that instruments and manages the entire customer journey. helping companies find those new customers and grow those new customers. So that's what we do, and it's a lot of fun. I get the opportunity to talk to all kinds of companies in different industries around the world, and it's amazing how similar all of the challenges are for companies of all sizes and all industries and all geographies. They're trying to get the word out there, and they're trying to deliver an exceptional customer experience, and we help them manage that process every step of the way.
Excellent. All right, so just out of curiosity, what would be a ballpark average lifetime value for a customer for you guys?
Well, that's a specific question. Average lifetime value for a customer. And I think when you ask that question, the very first thing that comes to my mind, Scott, is that website, the blog, forentrepreneurs.com, FOR entrepreneurs.com, which is a blog written by a venture capitalist here in Silicon Valley named David Skok, S-K-O-K. And if there's any one thing that your listeners remember today, is do a Google search on David Skok, and you'll get to 4 Entrepreneurs. And he maps out the financials of a SaaS company in perfect detail. And he's got some fantastic presentations. In fact, he's been a speaker at SaaSter, the annual event for SaaS companies.
Yes.
He's been a speaker there for years. All of his presentations are up there. If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a company and you want to think about how to structure the financials of your company, no better blog than forentrepreneurs.com. And if there's a name to remember, it's David Skok. And in there, David talks about customer acquisition cost.
Okay.
He talks about customer lifetime value. And the way he describes it is to help companies kind of normalize these numbers out. Because one company, their average lifetime value might be $15,000. And for another company, the average lifetime value might be $100,000. But in there, the effort to get there, to get to those are just numbers. They're abstract numbers. So how do you turn it from abstract numbers into a common denominator across all types of SaaS companies? And the way to do that is to divide in your average selling cost, your average deal size, and turn those numbers into months. So a better question, a question you ask me, what's the right average lifetime value? Rather than answering that number in dollars and cents, I want to answer that number in months or years. And I would argue that the right target for you as a company is to focus on signing up your customers for an average of a 3-year time period. And why 3 years? Let me tell you why 3 years. Because if you work your way backwards to customer acquisition cost, the average number for you to be thinking about is the cost of acquiring a new customer should be about 1 year. And then you keep a customer for 3 years. So you recover your costs in 1 year and you get 2 years of profit after that.
Okay.
Now, and I can go into more details around why 1 year and 3 and that sort of thing, but that idea of the cost of acquiring a customer should be about 1 year's worth of revenue. And then you should get another 2 years of revenue as profit on top of that. And that'll give you the fuel that you need to grow your business. So I would target a 3-year average lifetime value.
I mean, but obviously you'd want to go beyond the 3 years if you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're saying that a 3 years would be a good average?
Good average for a young company getting started. If you're a more mature company and you've been in business for, we're tracking an average lifetime value, depending on customer segment, but for greater than 5 years, absolutely. I think what you're looking for in there across the board is, like I said earlier, I've got a customer who's been with me since the day we opened it for business, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great customer, and they've been with us for a long time, and I appreciate their loyalty, and I'm really proud of being able to help them grow as a company. But if you're looking for that average in there, and you're just getting started as a company, you really, if you're doing anything less than 3 years as an average lifetime value, it's difficult to build the business. It's difficult to generate the cash flow that you need to grow the business.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what are your thoughts on balancing inbound and outbound marketing for best results?
Oh boy, you get to some really hard questions really quickly. You get right to the heart of it. Okay. So I talked about how you want to build a business model where you're targeting a 3-year lifetime value, and behind that you want to target for 1 year or less in terms of how long it takes to recapture your cost of acquisition. And then you're asking the question behind that: how do you go find those new customers to acquire? And there's a variety of ways to approach that, and certainly the thing that has captured the imagination of the technology arena for the last 10 years, 15 years, is the idea of inbound marketing, content marketing. So creating really interesting and valuable content that when people are doing Google searches, or they're for instance, listening to a podcast like this, or they are reading an article on Forbes.com, your name is mentioned throughout all that, and that brings people back to your website. And then in your website, you've got this really valuable content that helps them think about how to improve their business or improve their personal life, depending if it's B2B or B2C. And then that pulls somebody into a marketing funnel, and you instrument every step of that funnel. And that's inbound marketing. Outbound prospecting has been around forever. And it's the idea of a salesperson, and often in the world of prospecting, your business development representatives, maybe somebody who's earlier in their career and their job is to pound the phones and work the email and get connected to decision makers, and then connect that decision maker with their more experienced salesperson who closes the deal. And the idea that outbound sales, outbound prospecting was no longer relevant in today's internet era was an idea that really fueled inbound marketing 10 years ago. And I think the pendulum swung back. I think people are seeing that inbound marketing is just a piece of the equation, that you need to be investing in both inbound and outbound, that you need to have a good mix between the two. Certainly the more cost-effective path is the inbound. Yes. But then there reaches a point where you got to start layering on outbound in order to continue to fuel and drive that growth. So I would certainly recommend to any young SaaS company, you focus on inbound first. Absolutely, you got to get your message crisp and clear. You got to optimize your search engine, your SEO as a whole, and you got to do everything you can to really fuel that inbound machine. But then you're going to come in and you're going to layer on top of that an outbound machine. And there's a lot of new tools these days from CRM companies that help you drive the outbound prospecting. It's called sales acceleration. It's a whole new space by itself that's gotten a lot of the best practices from inbound marketing automation now applied to sales acceleration. And I'd argue as a company that you should ultimately be expecting, when you're at scale, you're a $100-200 million company, you're going to see half your pipeline coming from inbound marketing and half your pipeline coming from outbound. But when you're a smaller company, maybe you're more in the 1 million, 5 million, 10, 20 million in revenue, you're going to see closer to 75% of your pipeline coming from inbound and 25% coming from outbound.
Okay. What about pay-per-click though? Because I've seen some people refer that as inbound and other people refer to it as outbound. Personally, I think it's inbound, but I'd be interested to see.
I think it's inbound. Absolutely. It's just part of building that honeypot, right? You're pulling people to your website. That's the whole point, is to pull people to your website so that you can engage them with the content that you've created. And there's so many different ways to pull people to your website.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything from pay-per-click to content syndication, to AdWords spend on search engine marketing as a whole. I mean, there's all these different avenues for getting people to your website, but PPC is just another mechanism, another lever to pull in the world of inbound marketing.
Exactly. Okay. And some tips on approaching reducing churn and retaining paying customers, which sort of goes back to what you're talking about before.
I have a bit of a controversial view on this one. Okay. And what I mean by that is, in the world of SaaS companies, and now it's growing to technology companies, customer success as a discipline has become well entrenched. Everybody understands that you have to continuously engage with your customers after you sign them up to make sure that they're getting value out of your software, that they're using your software, that they've gone through all the steps. You know, the number one reason for churn is people never get started, right? That's true for every company. Every company out there, that's the number one reason why you have churn, until you get a really effective onboarding program in place, and then the next reasons start popping in there.
Yeah.
But in the world of customer success, there's a whole discipline that really kind of comes from the legacy of support and training. That the core of customer success is around onboarding, is around continuously communicating value to the customers through that onboarding and training and customer service approach. And then there's other companies out there that look at customer success as a sales function, because your best sellers are the people that know how to unlock value, who need to know how to talk about value, who know how to go beyond just the discussion of, are you using my stuff? But instead start talking about, are there more problems I can help you solve? Because that's really where the equation flips in the world of churn and gross retention, net retention, and building a business model designed to grow off of your own install base, and new logo acquisition is what fuels acceleration, but your own existing customer base grows on its own, is you have to keep selling into your customers. And the people who are most effective at selling are salespeople.
Yeah.
Right? Customer service people are really effective at solving problems. So I've watched this unfold inside my own business over the last 20 years. And I have a core belief that your best customer success managers are sellers who know how to unlock value and know how to leverage the resources of the company around onboarding and training and customer service to solve specific problems. But in the end, you got to come back and ask the customer, what's the next problem I can solve for you?
Yeah. Because there always is a next problem.
If there isn't, then you got a problem with your business model.
Yeah,
it's hard to grow.
Okay. All right. So what's your favorite business book?
Favorite business book. I got so many, right? So here's a couple I'll throw out. So Good to Great, Jim Collins.
Oh, yeah.
It's an absolute must read. And the core idea of Good to Great, two ideas in there really more than anything else, is one, you need to know what your core concept is, the thing that sets you apart, right? And in that book, they call it the hedgehog. And if you read the book, you'll understand why he calls it the hedgehog. And you got to really never lose track of that core value proposition that you do better than anybody else, and that's woven into the DNA of your company. And then you need to wrap discipline around that. You need to wrap discipline in your leadership, discipline in your execution, discipline in how you work with customers. And let me tell you, as a young entrepreneur who'd never run a company before, I had never even managed people when I started my company. I'd never been the manager of anybody when I started my company. Suddenly I'm an executive.
Yeah.
How do you do that, right? I know how to write code. and the idea of being laser focused on your core mission and then putting discipline around it. For me, that was my growth path as an executive, and I think is a big part of our growth path as a company. The next book, so I'll take good high level business book, right? And we'll all say, yeah, Good to Great, good book, good book. And frankly, we've all heard it, or if you haven't heard about it, one Google search, you'll find a summary of that book. You'll find lots of summaries of the book in just a heartbeat. Let me take it down to a little piece of niche advice that you probably won't hear from anybody else. I'm a developer by background. So a little bit about me. I'm a developer. I write code. I got my degree in computer science. I went on to be a product manager, and then I started my own company. And I'm a products guy. I like to build a product. And then I started my own company, and I went, through the executive ranks and leading all the different aspects of my company as I did along the way. And I ended up finding that communicating my vision was how I got scale around me, because I couldn't write all the code. I couldn't write all the marketing copy. I couldn't create the website. I had to hire people around me, and I had to be able to communicate that vision to them with clarity, with conviction, with passion. And I found as a developer, I like frameworks. I like to build on top of frameworks, right? I like to take other people's ideas and plug my ideas into them and deliver them at scale. That's kind of the whole secret sauce of writing software, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking for frameworks for communicating my ideas, how to communicate messaging and positioning, and how to break those ideas apart. And several years ago, I had the opportunity to run marketing for SugarCRM. I went from being CTO to CMO. There's an idea, right? Now, I did CMO for a few years, and then we hired a real CMO, a career CMO, right? But I had my opportunity to really kind of dig into marketing and wrestle with the challenge of communicating our vision at scale. And let me find the book in here. Here it is. This is the beauty of living in Silicon Valley. All right. So I talked to my neighbor about the challenges that I've got going on. I went CTO to CMO, how to communicate the vision. I'm struggling with structuring our messaging and our positioning in a clear way. And he says, "Oh, that's what I do for a living." I'm sorry, what? So yeah, I'm a consultant. I'm a marketing consultant, and I help people with their product marketing. His name is Mike Gospie. He's my neighbor. Literally lives right next door to me.
Okay.
And I was describing the challenge of personas and positioning and messaging. He said, "Oh, I wrote a book on that." Oh, okay, Mike. How about if I give you a bushel of tomatoes and you give me a copy of your book? And that's what this book does here, is it walks through the mechanics of building your personas and your positioning framework and your messaging and your unique selling proposition and all the different types of messaging. It's a fantastic book, and it really helped center my mind in the mechanics of communicating my vision. So there's a recommendation you probably won't hear very often.
Yeah, I've never heard that one before, but yeah, interesting story to tie it into. All right, so just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about SugarCRM?
SugarCRM.com, absolutely. But behind the scenes is Sugar Club. That's our community site. So sugarclub.sugarcrm.com is where you're going to find posts from me, from several other executives, dialogue between us and our customers and our community as a whole. So if you really want to kind of get past the first level sugarcrm.com marketing message and you want to really start connecting with the people, I encourage you to come to Sugar Club. It's open to everybody, and I'd love to pick up the conversation with any of your listeners there.
Awesome. Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, Clint. I appreciate your time. That was fantastic.
My pleasure, Scott.
Thanks.